Welcome back to Currency Revalue, the channel where we uncover the stories and hidden forces shaping global currencies. Today, we dive deep into one of the most debated financial mysteries of our time, the possible revaluation of the Iraqi dinar. Some say it could soar to 3 per dinar, transforming lives overnight. Others warn that such a move would bankrupt the nation and collapse its fragile economy. The truth, as always, is more complex and much more fascinating. In this episode, we break down guru insights, central bank updates, and geopolitical realities to give you the most complete picture available. Whether you hold dinar or are simply curious about the global financial system, what you're about to learn could shift the way you see money, oil, and power in the 21st century. So let us begin our journey. Imagine holding a single 25,000 Iraqi dinar note. Today, it may not seem like much, perhaps a fraction of a US dollar's worth. But if the currency were to revalue to 3 per dinar, that same note would suddenly be worth 75,000. For investors holding stacks of these 30 notes, the potential windfall sounds life-changing. And yet, questions remain. Could Iraq truly support such a valuation? Would international markets recognize it? And what would this mean for ordinary Iraqis, whose salaries, savings, and livelihoods hang in the balance? This is not just about numbers on a currency exchange board. It is about the future of an entire nation and the ripple effects across global finance. We start with an insight from Newshound and Intel Guru Fnulnu. According to his perspective, the Iraqi dinar could indeed be revalued to $3 in value. He argues that once the central bank introduces new lower denominations, the older 30 notes will no longer circulate outside Iraq but will instead be tightly controlled by banks. In his vision, cross-border transactions will be limited, ensuring the value applies both domestically and internationally. Under such a scenario, the 25,000 dinar note would indeed be worth 75,000 US dollars. Meanwhile, the new 25 dinar note replacing the larger denominations would carry purchasing power equivalent to 75 in today's terms. For Iraqi citizens, this would represent a dramatic leap from the current equivalent of about 26. This vision paints the revaluation not as a redenomination where old notes are simply replaced and values reset, but as a strategic financial transformation. And importantly, he stresses that without the introduction of a digital dinar, none of this would be possible. Digital currencies are rapidly changing the way nations manage money. For Iraq, the introduction of a digital dinar could allow the government to tightly monitor transactions, prevent counterfeiting, and regulate cross-border flows. This is crucial, as it reduces the risks of mass speculation and sudden outflows of wealth. The idea is that the physical currency, the notes and coins in circulation, would coexist with digital forms used for international trade and banking. In this way, Iraq could protect its economy domestically while still integrating with global markets. But is this bold vision realistic? Let us turn to another voice in the community. In response to critics like Guru Sandy Ingram, who argue that such a massive revaluation would bankrupt Iraq, Fnulnu pushes back strongly. He insists this assumption is false, pointing to the dual existence of both digital and hard currency. According to his perspective, Iraq's digital currency would facilitate exports and imports, while physical money would continue to serve daily domestic commerce. The larger 30 notes, he suggests, would be recalled by the central bank and used only for interbank transactions. Citizens would exchange them for new lower denominations under strict, time-limited deadlines. In other words, Iraq could balance the books without triggering economic collapse, at least in theory. Next, we turn to Iraqi Dinar Newshound Guru Pimpi, who offers a more traditional economic perspective rooted in supply and demand. Citing an article from the central bank titled "We Have Convenient Foreign Reserves Capable of Defending the Exchange Rate," Pimpy highlights how foreign reserves act as a stabilizing force. If the exchange rate begins rising too quickly, Iraq can release more dinars into circulation, increasing supply and preventing runaway appreciation. Conversely, if the dinar falls too low, the central bank can restrict the money supply, creating demand and strengthening the currency. This approach demonstrates that Iraq does not need a sudden, dramatic revaluation to strengthen the dinar. Instead, careful monetary management leveraging its oil revenues and reserves can gradually build value over time. But then comes the wild card factor. According to Guru Militia Man, Iraq has a history of sudden, unannounced changes in exchange rates. For example, the shift from 1,450 to 1,310 dinars per US dollar in 2023 came without warning. The central bank did not notify the public beforehand, it simply announced, "Boom, we just did it." This unpredictability raises a critical question: if Iraq revalued before without advance notice, could they do it again, perhaps on a much larger scale? For investors, this is both exciting and nerve-wracking. It means that waiting for official announcements may be futile. The change, if it comes, could be instant and irreversible. Newshound Guru Claire directs our attention to recent comments from the central bank governor, Ali Mohsen Al-Alak. In his words, the CBI has already achieved many of its objectives in banking reform and has begun implementing them on schedule. This is not mere speculation. It's an official acknowledgement that Iraq is moving toward a modernized, transparent financial system, and banking reform is a cornerstone of currency reform. Without trusted, well-regulated banks, no currency, whether physical or digital, can hold international credibility. So, from bold predictions of 3 valuations to cautious economic strategies and sudden surprises, we see a tapestry of possibilities. Iraq sits at a crossroads where every decision, from the rollout of digital currency to the management of reserves, could reshape not only its domestic economy but also global investor sentiment. At this point in our journey, we must ask, what's holding the revaluation back? According to Intel guru Mark Z, we may be in the very last moments of this long and frustrating wait. He describes it as watching the final minutes of a tense game, where the outcome feels inevitable, yet the clock ticks agonizingly slow. For investors who have been holding dinar for years, even decades, this analogy resonates. Each rumor, each article, and each whisper of reform feels like the build-up before the final whistle. But Mark Z insists that the framework is already in place, it's just a matter of execution. Boots on the ground, Guru Frank 26 and Firefly. Next, we turn to Guru Frank 26, who often relays insights from boots on the ground in Iraq. One of his sources, known as Firefly, reports directly on developments within the country. According to Firefly, Central Bank Governor Al-Alak has announced that the recent banking changes are already complete and now being implemented. Frank 26 emphasizes the importance of these words, highlighting that this is not speculation or future planning, it is a description of actions already taken. To him, this means the final stages of monetary reform are not only underway but nearly finished. He interprets Al-Alak's remarks as a signal that the foundation for investment projects and currency stability has been laid. Frank 26 reacts with palpable excitement. "It just gets louder and louder every day," he declares, suggesting that each official statement brings us closer to the inevitable revaluation. Of course, excitement must be tempered with realism. One of the most pressing questions is simple: how can Iraq afford to pay out billions, even trillions of US dollars to exchange all these dinars held by investors around the world? This concern is addressed by Newshound and Intel guru MNT Goat. She explains that Iraq's wealth is not limited to physical currency or foreign reserves. Instead, its true backing comes from oil, the lifeblood of its economy and one of the most valuable commodities on earth. In her analysis, the U.S. Treasury plays a crucial role. By fronting the money for dinar exchanges, the Treasury can secure contracts to buy Iraqi oil at discounted rates. Later, this oil is resold at full market prices to a world thirsty for energy. The profit margin from this process, she argues, could amount to billions, even trillions, ensuring that the U.S. does not lose money by supporting the dinar's revaluation. In essence, oil becomes the silent guarantor of Iraq's currency. Let us pause here and examine this idea more closely. Historically, currencies have often been tied to tangible assets, gold under the gold standard, silver in earlier eras, and now, increasingly, commodities like oil. For Iraq, which holds some of the largest proven oil reserves in the world, this connection is both logical and powerful. If every dinar exchanged internationally is indirectly backed by oil revenues, then Iraq has a sustainable way to honor its commitments without draining its financial reserves. Think of it this way: rather than paying investors directly out of a limited pile of cash, Iraq and its partners can leverage future oil sales, something they have in abundance. This shifts the narrative from Iraq can't afford this to Iraq is rich enough in resources to make this work. MNT Goat also reminds us that what's unfolding now is not a sudden event but the culmination of more than a decade of preparation. Since March of this year, she points out, we've seen numerous articles about disputes between Baghdad, Kurdistan, and international oil companies like SAMO. At times, these conflicts seemed like endless roadblocks preventing progress. But recently, Iraq announced that the tripartite agreement has been solidified. This deal resolves many of the long-standing disputes between Baghdad and Erbil, as well as between the federal government and oil companies. For MNT Goat, this is a breakthrough moment. Without resolving these disputes, Iraq could never have built the trust and stability required for international investment, and without that, a revaluation would be impossible. Here's why this matters: currency is not just about economics. It is also about politics, trust, and governance. If Iraq is divided internally, with Kurdistan refusing to cooperate and oil companies pulling out, no amount of central bank reform could make the dinar attractive. Investors would simply walk away, fearing instability. But if Baghdad and Erbil stand united, with clear agreements in place to manage oil revenues and trade, then Iraq suddenly looks like a viable partner for global finance. Political agreements, then, are not just side issues, they are the very foundation of currency reform. Consider where Iraq has come from. Just 20 years ago, the nation was ravaged by war, sanctions, and hyperinflation. The dinar was practically worthless, and confidence in the banking system was non-existent. Today, while challenges remain, the narrative is shifting. Iraq boasts convenient foreign reserves, ongoing banking reforms, digital currency initiatives, and now, stronger political agreements. This transformation is not complete, but it is undeniable. The journey from chaos to structure has been long and painful, but it is precisely this trajectory that fuels speculation of a revaluation. If Iraq has already made it this far, why should it stop short of the final step so far? We've examined bold predictions, cautious warnings, and the role of oil in backing Iraq's currency. We've seen how political agreements between Baghdad and Kurdistan are strengthening the nation's foundation. But what does this mean for ordinary Iraqis? What happens when the 3-0 notes disappear and new lower denominations take their place, and how might sudden central bank announcements shock the global stage once again? At the heart of Iraq's currency journey lies the Central Bank of Iraq, known as the CBI. This institution faces one of the most complex challenges in global finance: how to restore credibility to a currency that has been battered by decades of war, sanctions, corruption, and inflation. For the CBI, the key is balance. They must strengthen the dinar without destabilizing the economy. They must attract foreign investment while protecting Iraqi citizens from sudden shocks. And above all, they must convince the international community that the dinar is more than a speculative play, that it is a reliable, usable currency for trade, savings, and commerce. One of the most talked about topics in the dinar community is the fate of the so-called 30 notes, the large bills such as the 25,000 dinar note. Why do these notes exist? The answer is simple: years of hyperinflation. When prices soar, governments print larger and larger denominations to keep up. But in a stable economy, such large notes are impractical. The CBI has long signaled its plan to gradually withdraw these oversized notes from circulation and introduce lower denominations, such as the 1, 5, 10, and 20 dinar bills. For investors, this move is highly symbolic. Lower denominations mean the currency is beginning to function like those of more developed economies. It suggests normalization, stability, and progress toward true international credibility. Here's where confusion often sets in. Some fear that when the CBI removes the 3 zeros, it will simply lop the currency, meaning that a 25,000 dinar note would suddenly be worth 25 dinars, wiping out potential gains for investors. But experts argue this is not the intent. Iraq's stated strategy is revaluation, not redenomination. In a revaluation, the value of each note increases, rather than shrinking. The difference is critical. A redenomination is like exchanging 10 old bills for one new bill, with no increase in value. A revaluation, however, is a recognition that the underlying economy has strengthened, and therefore, the currency should command more value internationally. Recent statements from central bank officials suggest they are serious about a controlled revaluation. Governor Al-Alak has spoken repeatedly about aligning Iraq's banking system with international standards, digitizing payments, and building sufficient reserves. These are not the actions of a bank preparing to lop its currency, they are the actions of an institution laying the groundwork for a stronger dinar, one that could hold its own on the global stage. But for investors, the waiting has been grueling. Some have held dinar for more than a decade, watching rumors rise and fall like waves. Psychologically, this journey has created a unique dynamic. On one hand, hope drives people to hold on, believing that one day their patience will pay off. On the other hand, frustration builds with every delay, leading to skepticism, doubt, and sometimes anger. It is important to understand that large-scale currency reforms are rarely quick. They require deep, structural change, often taking years to complete. For Iraq, every small reform, whether it's digitizing payments, increasing reserves, or prosecuting corruption, is another brick in the foundation of a future revaluation. The speculation around the dinar is unlike almost any other investment story. It blends economics, politics, hope, and rumor into a global conversation followed by millions. Part of the fascination comes from the sheer scale of the potential gains. Imagine buying a note for under 20 and seeing it one day valued at hundreds, even thousands, of US dollars. The life-changing possibilities are what keep people engaged, even through years of uncertainty. But speculation can also be dangerous. False rumors, unverified intel, and hype-driven predictions can cause panic or irrational decisions. That is why credible voices, whether analysts, economists, or informed observers, are so important in cutting through the noise. Ultimately, the fate of the dinar depends not just on policy, but on trust. The world must trust that Iraq can manage its finances responsibly, that contracts will be honored, and that corruption will be fought at the highest levels. This is why the current government's visible anti-corruption campaign matters so much. Public prosecutions of officials, tighter auditing, and more transparent financial reporting all signal to the world, Iraq is changing. And as trust grows, so does the credibility of the dinar. Another key factor is Iraq's relationship with international institutions like the IMF and the World Bank. These organizations demand proof of stability before offering support. By aligning with their standards, Iraq is not just ticking boxes. It is actively seeking international validation. And that validation is what could one day convince global markets to treat the dinar as a serious currency once again. So, where does this leave us? We've explored the mechanics of the CBI, the debate over redenomination versus revaluation, the gradual removal of 3-0 notes, and the psychological weight carried by investors. But perhaps the most important question remains: what scenarios lie ahead? What is the best case outcome for Iraq and its investors, and what are the risks if things go wrong? As Iraq stands on the edge of financial transformation, the world is watching. The dinar's story is no longer just about numbers on a currency note. It is about national pride, economic sovereignty, and the chance to rewrite decades of financial struggle. For Iraqis, the revaluation represents more than just money. It symbolizes the possibility of stability, the ability to travel, trade, and save with confidence, and the hope of leaving behind years of hardship. For investors abroad, it represents the culmination of patience, speculation, and belief in a nation's recovery. In the best-case scenario, Iraq successfully executes its reforms. The central bank carefully withdraws the oversized 3-0 notes and replaces them with lower denominations. Digital payments expand across the nation, reducing corruption and increasing efficiency. Oil revenues continue to grow, while foreign investment in infrastructure, energy, and technology surges. In this scenario, the dinar revalues upward, not overnight chaos, but a measured, steady climb. Imagine the exchange rate rising from fractions of a cent to 1 cent, then 5, then 10, and eventually approaching parity with the US dollar. For Iraqis, this would mean stronger purchasing power, lower inflation, and a genuine rise in quality of life. For investors, it would mean life-changing returns. But perhaps the more likely outcome is a middle path. In this scenario, Iraq continues its reforms, but the pace is slower. The dinar strengthens modestly but does not skyrocket overnight. Investors see steady returns, but not windfalls. For Iraq, this path ensures stability. Too rapid a revaluation could trigger inflation, capital flight, or unsustainable speculation. But a gradual appreciation allows the economy to adjust, businesses to adapt, and ordinary citizens to benefit. This scenario may not be as dramatic, but it could be the healthiest in the long run. Of course, there is also the risk of setbacks. Political instability, corruption, or external pressures could derail reforms. If Iraq fails to meet IMF and World Bank standards, investor confidence could weaken. Oil prices, the lifeblood of Iraq's economy, could fall sharply, reducing government revenue and stalling projects. In the worst case, the dinar remains weak, reforms stall, and investors face prolonged uncertainty. For Iraqis, the dream of stronger purchasing power would be delayed yet again. But even in this scenario, history shows that nations with natural wealth, especially oil, rarely remain stagnant forever. Iraq's resources guarantee that while the road may be bumpy, progress is still possible. If Iraq succeeds, the ripple effects could extend far beyond its borders. A stronger dinar would mean more robust trade relationships, particularly with regional neighbors such as Turkey, Iran, Jordan, and the Gulf states. For the United States and Europe, a stronger Iraq means a more reliable partner in both energy and security. It could reshape Middle Eastern geopolitics, creating new alliances and shifting power balances. And for global investors, it could validate one of the most daring currency speculations of modern times. The biggest question remains, when will it happen? And the honest answer is no one knows. Central banks rarely announce revaluations in advance. In fact, as history shows, sudden changes are more likely. The 2023 adjustment, when Iraq shifted its official rate from 1450 to 1310 dinars per dollar, happened almost without warning. This unpredictability is frustrating for investors, but it is also a reminder, the moment of revaluation, when it comes, will arrive suddenly. One day the exchange rate will be here, the next day it will be different. For those holding the dinar, patience is not just a virtue, it is a necessity. Speculative investments require both endurance and perspective. Yes, the potential upside is enormous. But even if the revaluation takes longer than expected, the underlying story remains: Iraq is a nation rebuilding, reforming, and moving toward global reintegration. The path may be slow, but the trajectory is clear. At the end of the day, the Iraqi dinar revaluation is about more than investors cashing in. It is about a nation reclaiming its place in the world economy. It is about giving its people dignity through financial stability. And it is about demonstrating that even after decades of conflict, a country can rise again. Yes, for investors, the gains could be extraordinary. A single 25,000 dinar note, once worth less than 20, could one day be worth thousands. But for Iraqis, the real treasure is stability, prosperity, and hope for the next generation. This has been Currency Revalue, your trusted channel for in-depth updates on the Iraqi dinar and global currency shifts. As we conclude this deep dive, remember, the story of the dinar is still being written. It is a story of resilience, reform, and the relentless pursuit of progress. Whether the revaluation happens tomorrow, next year, or a decade from now, the seeds of transformation are already planted. And when history looks back, the rise of the Iraqi dinar may be remembered as one of the most remarkable financial turnarounds of our time.